Hello and welcome to episode 11 of the Tom Finn podcast. As you might be able to tell already, this is a kind of different episode than normal because I recorded the episode over Zoom because of the situation we're in. So I'm also recording myself at the moment in video format for the intro and outro. So if you're listening to this on audio, you might want to check out the video if you care. If not, then it doesn't matter. But so I am now awkwardly recording myself on my laptop because I don't have any recording equipment with me because of the situation we're in. Anyway, this episode features a conversation with Tim Wilson. I recorded this episode near the beginning of lockdown. There might be some issues with lag and things like that. My microphone didn't work at the very beginning, so there are a few technical issues, but I've tried to edit around them as much as possible. It shouldn't be too much of an issue, but I thought I'd just let you guys know. It made me quite nervous doing this episode because of those reasons. I don't have as much control, but it should be fine. I'll try to stop rambling as much as I am. It's just because I'm filming myself and it's making me feel very strange. You might know Tim from the reality TV show The Circle, Channel 4 show, where they put a bunch of people in a hotel and they can only communicate through social media, which means some people catfish, some people don't, and I think it's quite an interesting reality TV show as those types of shows go. Tim became mine and my partner's favourite, as well as probably most of the nation, I think, at the time. He was a very interesting man, a very lovely man, and he has had a very interesting life, including working abroad, in theatre and in politics. The conversation took us in and around these subjects, as well as a few other things from his early life to more recent. We didn't go full, I don't think we went full in depth in many subjects, but we did cover quite a lot. And I would love to meet Tim in real life and record another episode with him at some point, and maybe go more in depth in certain aspects of his life. But he's done so much that it was hard to, go full into certain subjects, but it's still an interesting conversation covering lots of topics with him, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Anyway, I'll talk more at the end of the episode, but for now, I hope you enjoy this conversation with Tim Wilson. So, you're Derby based, right?
No, I'm rugby based. I was born in Derby. I've only ever been to Derby twice in my life.
Oh, okay. How long were you in Derby for then?
Literally an afternoon,
Right.
twice. No, a whole day once. But the first time was an afternoon. My mother lived in Derby, and I was adopted as a baby, and I didn't know about my mother until and until the early part of the century. And my partner identified her. Because she was complaining about something, and he said, "Oh, that's just like you." and her complaint was extraordinary. The story was in the local press. She'd gone to the supermarket and bought some flour, and the flour was infected in some way. And her line was that she stood in her kitchen opening the cupboards, and the weevils from the flour had got into everything, and decimated my whole Christmas. I'm standing in the kitchen weeping, and Najati thought this was the sort of the sort of concept I might have. You take one thing and you sort of exaggerate that a little bit, but she was extraordinary, and she did have one of the most peculiar name, so it was quite easy to identify her. But she'd married a man called Williams, which would have made it impossible for me to find my birth parent. She returned back to her birth name, which was Cobbledick. Wow. Which is a wonderful name. Don't you think it sounds like something out of a Charles Dickens novel?
Yeah. I think that's quite fitting for you, though.
So my real name would be Williams. So the vague similarity to Robin Williams is probably no coincidence. It's probably I might find if I did some real digging that there was a link. But so she came from Ireland. She came over to Manchester. She married a man called Eric Williams in Manchester. They moved to Derby. I was born. I was the third in the family, and I've done everything I can to try and find my older brothers and sister, and my younger sibling. She had 9 children.
So why did she put you for adoption, if you don't mind me asking?
I was 2 months premature. She said I was 3 months premature. That would have made me a medical miracle in 1961.
Yeah.
She had 2 other children. She'd run away from my father. I think she'd fallen in love with my father's best friend. It was all quite sort of very EastEnders, really.
Yeah.
And then she had a motorbike accident. She was on the back of a motorbike. That may have been why I was born prematurely. And the local government judged that she wasn't able to raise 3 small children at the same time, I think, and took me away.
Right.
And I was then, I understand by looking at the paperwork, I was then in an orphanage and in a series of foster homes for about 3 years before I was adopted. So it probably explains why I'm such an inveterate sleepwalker and sleep talker, which I now have proof of, because some of the people in the circle recorded all my sleep talking, which was apparently very coherent.
Yes. Yeah. Didn't you say something about calling everyone sheep or something?
I did. Yes, I counted them out. Apparently, sheep or goats. I would have thought they would be goats, but the circle people insisted that I was talking about sheep. And they all had appropriate names: Brook sheep, Woody sheep. It's all very appropriate for Easter time, don't you think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're
and I was terribly upset about the people that I'd blocked.
Yeah.
So there could be no doubt about that. I mean, it was deep in my subconscious. I was very upset. I didn't like blocking people, and I didn't really like being a I can't remember what it was called now. I hated it so much I could never remember the name. I kept going instigating something. I don't know what to call it. Influencer, yes, but I don't see myself as having very much influence. Instigator, I think, is so much, an instigator of chaos. Isn't that so much better concept?
Yeah. Well, when me and my partner were watching it, she would always get really upset whenever you would become influencer, because
she has no idea how upset I got.
I know. She could see. She was like, he so clearly doesn't want to do it. Just not made for that kind of game, I suppose.
No, and I knew it from the very, very beginning, and and I knew the production team weren't happy with my responses.
I thought, though, the thing I was thinking about this earlier, actually, the thing I found most interesting about this series of The Circle was that people would come in there pretending to be other people because of experiences they've had in their own life of being treated differently. But The Circle happened to only have people in there that were just kind, genuine people that, only wanted to speak to people who were genuine and didn't like the persona that we were putting on, and would have preferred to speak to the actual person. I think that was really nice.
I think this is true. I think this is reality. I think in the American version, but more so in the Brazilian version, and I've got to have a look at the French version in a day or so, but certainly in the American version, and as I say, more so in the Brazilian version, there was a tendency to want to gameplay. And in that, the catfishing comes to the fore and it becomes more important. But I had a chat with Toby, and we, who was in the American version, simply delightful fellow. With any luck, fingers crossed, he's coming to the UK very soon, so I should be able to show him around. He's such an angel, really. But he was agreeing with me that catfishing was really a mistake. Looking for the catfish, I think we didn't go so far as to say being a catfish probably is a mistake. I think in terms of game playing, it's okay, but it just requires so much work to get it right. Because you've not only got to get the facts right, you've got to get that sort of emotional response right. And when you can't see somebody, when you're not in physical proximity to somebody. You don't have all those distractions of the, of the haircut and the touch and the smell and all these
Yeah.
physical attributes that human beings carry with them. When you've just got the text in front of you or a photograph, which may or may not be true, somehow your emotions are much more heightened. And I don't know, at this moment when so many people are in lockdown and they're isolated, I suspect they're realizing that they have a greater sense of community than they have ever had before. And this is something that, once you experience, maybe you want to keep. So maybe this is something that will change our lives for the better, oddly. The sense of lockdown will give us a greater sense of what we value, a greater sense of the positives in our community.
I saw briefly an article the other day that was David Lynch saying that he thinks that the world's going to be much kinder after this, and I hope it's true.
Well, I hope it will be, but I mean, who knows? I think we're getting so much wrong. I was looking today. In fact, I put up a little Instagram thing. I can't understand, all the Instagrams I'm putting up now come out as little black squares. So I'm obviously pressing the wrong button at some point. Maybe you can give me some advice on this at some point.
Okay.
But I don't know. I'm an Instagram virgin, and after 130 odd posts, I'm still making huge sort of newbie mistakes. But
I think people like you for that, though. They want that's genuine Tim,
Well, I reach out and I say help, and my Instagram following starts to sort of go down, and I start sort of losing followers. I think it's because I'm being a plonker, but actually, people are looking around to see what on earth they can do. And I mean, for myself, my sort of television watching, which was never very spectacular anyway, has trickled down to almost zero. And because what do I want to watch? Obviously, I don't want to watch reality TV. I know how that works. Special effects films, the moment I see a hint of green screen, I fall asleep. I love the technique. I love it. But I know how it's done, so I can't be pulled into the story for some reason. I love political thrillers, detective stories like Poirot, and so I love them, but I'm asleep within about 10 or 15 minutes because I've worked out who's done it. And that, in some ways, no matter how beautifully designed it is, that seems to be the sum of the program. So once you take out those, there's very little that I find to watch. And what I would like is a diet of 1950s and 1960s or 1950s and 1940s musicals. I think that would be. And you can see why the musical was so dominant in the from the 1930s up through to the 1950s, because it was a period of great tension, and you just want to turn to the media to switch off. You don't really, you don't really want to be thrilled, because life is so thrilling in itself, and there's sort of permutations of anxiety. You don't need to have that fix in the cinema. You've got it in real life.
Yeah. So to go back a little bit, would you call them your adopted parents, or would you just call them your parents?
Oh, I'd call them my mother. My father is irrelevant, but my mother is always the person who adopted me. Sometimes people go on about birth mother, but I regret finding my original mother, really, and she was she was an appalling individual, and mendacious and manipulative, funny and diverting, but you want somebody who you can trust in your life. You don't want to be pulling in more and more flotsam, which is just non-dependable.
Yeah. So what was your adopted mother like?
Oh, she was wonderful. She was diverting. She was endlessly entertaining. I think she'd married an irritating man who oddly also was called Eric. I don't think really we got on terribly well. I have a few memories of him walking up the stairs with me on his shoulders, but I don't have a lot of happy memories of him. I have a lot of happy memories of my mother.
Yeah.
cooking on the Arga, and cake making, eating the mixture. I was sent off to school quite early, and school became a sort of hideaway from what was quite a fractious home life. Really, my father and my mother were often fighting, and I did find school a retreat. But school itself, but both the schools I went to, my prep school and then the public school, they were very brutal. I've been back to them since. I've given out prizes in both schools. I've done talks in both schools. Yeah, the prep school was deeply, deeply brutal, and it was dominated by a Latin teacher who was about the size of a leprechaun, but vicious beyond belief. We actually had a man whose only job was to beat small children. And I went through the whole school without being beaten for some reason, but it didn't lessen the terror of being beaten. I think I was the only boy in the school never to have been beaten. And now that I understand, I have a medical condition called haemophilia, which may have something to do with being premature. I have no idea, but certainly my birth mother would have passed it on to me. So maybe the school were warned not to hit me. They did send me out to play rugby, and I used to see the ball and run like mad in the other direction. I tried to hide behind the big H's and read Lord of the Rings even in the snow. I remember I used to take it out with me to pitch, rain or shine, and when I got to the end, I went back to the beginning again, and that was from a very, very young age, 9, 10 years old.
Were the Lord of the Rings important for you then in terms of your creativity and?
Oh God, yes, yeah. Lord of the Rings, Ursula K. Le Guin, A Wizard of Earthsea. I don't know if you've come across those books.
No.
They're simply wonderful. They're like Tolkien light, but they're so they're wonderful. And she died about 2 years ago, or maybe just over a year ago. She was a wonderful American writer. She toyed with science fiction as well, which I didn't like, as indeed did C.S. Lewis, who is very light, extra light. But C.S. Lewis I also adore and adored. And I love the near stories. I love fantasy. And I've even gone so far as to reading Aragorn and the sort of dragon books, and I read it even now. I'm not very much into sort of the big fantasy stuff. I like the slightly old-fashioned stuff. So fantasy and politics, those are my two things. Maybe the interweave in the person of Mrs. May, maybe. One of the most improbably useless prime ministers I think we have ever had in history. I remember coming across her as Home Secretary because I queried her approach to visas for students. I would still query the Home Office over its approach to visas, which just seems both disingenuous and extraordinarily ungrateful. We get these people to invest in our country by having their education here, and then the moment it's over, we throw them out without any gratitude or any grace. And we've educated these people to work in our system, and we think they're actually going to be privileged to go back to Russia or Serbia or wherever they've come from. And actually use the degree there. No, the degree is pretty useless there. The techniques we may have taught may be useful, but we could be using these people. They could be paying tax. They could be helping us. Instead, like so many people who come and study here, even our own people, they study here and they realize the jobs simply don't exist. Well, now maybe there will be many more jobs. We've got to invest in our country. One of the things. There's a lady in Oxford who's a professor of virology who thought that job existed. Vaccinology. Who thought that job existed?
Yeah,
and it does. And she thinks she's 80% certain that she's developed a vaccine for COVID-19, but she now needs money to wheel out the research. and to start producing vaccines. And then the real crunch is we have not got a tradition, a capacity for producing vaccines in this country. We rely on vaccines produced in Germany, Belgium, and France. So now would be the time to be investing in this industry and pushing out vaccines. So we so for the first time in this crisis, we're at the front of the crisis rather than lagging behind. We have skills, and for some reason our bureaucrats and our systems simply are getting in the way of those skills being realized, and it's in every single industry. It's not just in the sort of bureaucratic nonsense where we hear our leaders say, "Oh, we're making ventilators, and the first of 1,000 per week are coming off, are being delivered this week." And you look to see what that is. It's actually 30. We've got bureaucrats who are so used to telling lies and so used to dissembling that when we're in the face of a genuine crisis, they don't seem to be able to think outside the box, and they don't seem to be able to get away from this weasel-worded rubbish which you get on the end of a telephone, where we're here to help you. No, they're not here to help you. They're here to make as much money and keep you on the phone for as long as you possibly can stand it. And if you're trying to make a complaint, they hope you're going to go away. We need people to actually say what they mean and mean what they say, and be honest about it all. Awful man called Tolstoy, who's actually related to the writer, and he sort of single-handedly campaigned to toughen up a really pernicious law, which is the Russian equivalent of Clause 28, that you mustn't be promoting a sort of non-traditional family value. So you mustn't be promoting homosexuality in schools or in education. So as a professor in a Russian university, having just been outed rather spectacularly in a TV series, I've never said that I was gay at any point in my life. I think I just simply assume people are going to look at my socks and draw their own conclusions. And so yes, it seemed unwise to go back at the moment, because now what happened at times has this man Pyotr Tolstoy has been ratcheting the mood up, so people are now being threatened with between 12 and 20 years in prison. And there was a wonderfully innocent boy called Pavel who fled the country, and I was really very upset to come across that story. But yeah, so there are nasty people. But there are also terribly good people. Wherever you look for people in whichever society, you will find good people. But you have to look.
Your time in politics. There's something you said on The Circle that's probably been said back to you many times now, which is that you wanted to expose UKIP from the inside.
Well, it's true. It's true. I would have much preferred to have exposed it from the outside, but you just can't see. How do you know if something is genuinely racist? And simply to say, "Oh, it's racist," and be on the outside is nonsensical. It's like sort of propaganda. So the only way you can identify if this is true is to go and see. I thought for a long time that there was something deeply wrong with Europe. I'd lived in Greece. I'd seen the damage that was being done to Greece at first hand. So I knew there were problems with Europe. So I am sympathetic to a lot of the UKIP starting point. The conclusion, which is the one which was rolled out a few years ago, is not one I would have advanced as the desired option. It is an option, but there were many other options available. But in fact, the UKIP propaganda won the day. And now we have to deal with the reality. We can't deal with a sort of what if. We have to deal with reality. But the big question was UKIP itself racist? And I found evidence of racism in the system. I didn't expect to be catapulted into a position where I was standing as an MP at all. I was terribly flattered. I was standing up against Andrea Leadsom. I'd come across her in my campaign about student visas. So, and when she was my MP, and when I went to see her in a surgery, she spent 10 minutes hectoring me about the government's policies. Didn't let me speak at all. So I then had to write to her and say, well, when you're having a surgery, your job is to listen. And these are the points that I would have made if you'd let me get a word in.
Yeah.
And, and then the thing developed from there. But, we weren't going to get anywhere with that. And I found her really quite irritating. And it wasn't until she came up against Mrs. May that I started to have any sympathy for her at all. But yeah, I think she sort of redeemed herself. I think people are capable of redemption, and I think that's a good thing. And I'm sure Mr. Farage can redeem himself as well. But I think he's the best thing to come out of UKIP. He's a tremendous speaker. I think he's doing the right thing now by being quiet, because he hasn't really got anything to say about COVID. And it's there is a point where you want to look at the whole of that Brexit debate and say, if you haven't got anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. It was an important debate. I think it was important for us to have it. I think it would have been much better if we'd been able to have it with a lot more of the facts and a lot less of the propaganda. But that debate was dictated by UKIP. And we shouldn't be surprised that racism emerged in the public debate and in the referendum debate as it happened, because that was there at the heart of the UKIP project.
So,
and I identified it. Yeah, and I wish I'd waited 2 or 3 more weeks to blow the whistle, because I would have then been in the middle of an election. I would have done more damage. But I was very, very conscious that I had to go off and teach, and I would have left my partner in the house, and I really didn't want to brick through the window, and I was frightened, actually. So I brought the thing. I didn't delay. I went to the press really on the advice of Humza Yusuf, and we played it from there. But if I had found that UKIP was not racist, then I would have probably stayed in UKIP and tried to campaign for a different outcome. I would try to campaign to change Europe from within, and I would have tried to. I would have thrown myself into that sort of scenario, I think. But I was pretty certain it was racist. I was unfortunately right.
That's what I never really understood, without us getting too big into Brexit or anything. The whole changing it from the inside surely is much better than abandoning it completely if you have a problem with it.
I entirely agree with you, but I think the important thing was the debate was skewed in the wrong direction. You see, we went to the aid of Europe twice in the 20th century, and we really should have gone to the aid of Europe a third time in the 21st century. Europe needs what we have to offer, which is a sort of straightforwardness which isn't natural to the European way of thinking, I think. And I think we did Europe a lot of good when we were in Europe, and I think we could have done Europe a lot of good now, and I think we could have changed the way Europe was thinking. And so, not for our own benefit, we should have stayed in Europe. That's the point, and that's the argument that I never heard in the referendum campaign. I tried to make it, but my voice wasn't big enough.
Yeah.
That we should have stayed in for Europe, not primarily for ourselves. It wouldn't have done us any benefit. It wouldn't have given us any benefit at all, really. So during my time in university, I never had enough money, so I was constantly drawing. and designing things and doing theatre, and often for tickets, and I would sell the tickets, and I would and that would produce another bottle of Ribena, or a lump of cheddar cheese. And in my last year, I was actually engaged as a nanny. So I was cycling down for 4 miles out from a little village just outside Oxford into Oxford for my tutorials, and then cycling back to take little girl to ballet classes. So I just continued that sort of life really for a few years. Then my mother died, and then I took off to Greece, and I became a goat herder and a teacher. I was teaching a little bit of sort of even in Oxford. I think even as a nanny, I was asked to do some teaching, so I did some teaching, and I was teaching a whole range of subjects from Latin and Greek to history, and I was never any good at teaching maths. I don't know why, because I think maths is the most beautiful subject. I still can't do it. I wish I had studied law. I think out of all the subjects at university, law is the most exciting. And when I met my partner in Greece and discovered that there was a serious problem, which took a little bit of time because we had no common language to start with. He spoke Turkish, I spoke English, and neither of us really spoke Greek to the point where we could communicate in that language at the time. I think my Greek got quite good, but and then the British ambassador told me to stop speaking Greek because if I shut up, I'd learn so much more. And he was quite right. People babble away in the language thinking that you can't speak it, and oh, that's very interesting information. So you keep quiet, keep your mouth shut. But my partner was tortured in Greece, and I realised that we had to take the case to court, and ultimately to the European Court of Human Rights. It took about 11 years. We won, but there was still sort of the European Court of Human Rights advised the Greek government to change the law, particularly to recognise male rape, to refine the definition of torture, but that hasn't happened. We hope that will happen. So the case, in a way, is still ongoing, and I also think the sort of support that somebody needs if they've been tortured is ongoing, and I think because my partner looks okay, there's an assumption that he is, and maybe he is, but he could be better.
Yeah.
And I think sort of hidden wounds are very difficult to establish, to cure, and to look after. But yeah, law. I just love collecting information and seeing where it leads me. So from that point of view, the circle was extraordinary because that's what I do. I listen, I collect information, and I sort of think, well, is this credible? I'm not Sherlock Holmes, and I'm not Poirot. I don't have that sort of brain. I'm more of a Miss Marple, a sort of hirsute Miss Marple.
Yeah.
I sort of think, ooh, yes, I know somebody like this.
It seems to me that in your life, you've had to deal with a lot of very heavy things without, finding a better word for it. You've put yourselves in some extreme situations. Would you say that's correct?
Maybe. I don't see it like that. I think you want your life to be full of opportunity, and that means good and bad. And I think I've lived that. And you can't have the wonderful moments without so having some pretty grim moments as well. But you don't. You've got to man up and keep going. And keep smiling as much as you possibly can. You know, Churchill's line was KBO, and I used this in the circle, and no one seemed to know what it meant. But it's very simple: keep buggering on,
Yeah.
and it's it's a wonderful thing. You know, just keep doing it, keep going.
Would you
You're
say
not necessarily going to get everything right.
are you someone that then enjoys the excitement of life itself? You're not someone who would just sit down and let life continue without you.
Oh no, like I want to be invested in it. I want to be invested in what I'm doing. Yeah, I enjoy meeting life head on.
Mm.
I don't feel it's something that I just happen to go through. I want to change it. I would. I want to change, and I want to change it partly with humour. I don't see myself as a great intellectual or a great teacher or anything like that, or a great artist. I think I see myself as somebody who can do things with a certain um, uh, gentle touch, and with a slight smile or a smirk.
Mm.
And I think everything benefits from that. I think I think I've got a few talents, and and I've got a bit of a brain, but I think mostly I've got a sort of optimism,
Mm.
which is the thing which is useful, and it's got me through a lot of difficult situations. And I think I would love to share that with more people. And so this is one reason why I put a lot of things on hold at the moment. I've got a lot of projects, and I sort of try and get them done. And one reason I tend not to watch television is because there's so much to do in life now. But I feel I need to make time to do podcasts, to do Instagram things, to blog, to put up YouTube videos.
Have you always had this optimism, or was it something you had to find?
I had to find it. You have to find it, but and I have to find it every day.
Mm.
It's not a given. You have to find it. And it's not found from outside. This is the other nonsensical thing. It's not found from, oh, what a lovely morning, how lovely the sun is today. It's not there. You don't get the optimism from the sun. You get the optimism from inside. And the sun may stimulate that, but it's from inside you.
Mm.
It's from within. So you have to look into yourself, reach into yourself for the thing which you feel is good.
So
And there's
when
always something good.
you
And from other people. I think you get
yeah,
it from other people.
you were a theatre designer, right?
I was, and I became a theatre designer mostly by default. I loved it. I still love it. I think theatrically,
Mm.
um, and I'm quite old-fashioned in the sort of design I like. I love traditional theatre design. Though I also love a little bit of fiberglass. So I love the smell of fiberglass. But maybe I shouldn't be saying this. People are going to think I'm a glue sniffer now. But I love the big.
Mm.
I love big statements, even if you have to sort of hurry around to try and make sure that they're right.
How did you fall into it then?
In Oxford, I fell into designing. I think the first show I did was a show in Greek, and the second show was a Gilbert and Sullivan production of the Mikado, and I'm still very proud of that one actually.
Mm.
And then I went on from there, and then I designed things off the West End. I eventually morphed into being a sort of consultant, which was rather exciting. And I was consulting for a show in the West End. I think quite recently, but actually now I think about it, it's about 10 years ago or more. So that was entertaining. And I did a show. I did a revival of a Sondheim show called Assassins, which got some nice reviews in London. Yeah, at about the time when Mr. Clinton was having his problems with Monica Lewinsky.
Mm. Would you ever go into writing? Writing.
I write. I write
Oh.
all the time. I've got a few novels tucked away,
Mm.
but whether they ever get published, God knows. I would like to write a sort of history of reality TV, having been thrown into this strange phenomenon which I know nothing about,
Mm.
because I know nothing about it, and so it's sort of endlessly interesting. So I've never seen Big Brother. I've only occasionally seen Strictly Come Dancing. What links those two? And The Circle is. I only ever saw one series of The Circle, which was the series before mine. I still haven't seen my episode. The cat needs lifting up on. So she's very old. Yeah, I saw. I saw. I think episode 4 of my series, and then I couldn't take any more. I've seen the Brazilian one, at least most of it. I think I eventually got a bit bored. But there's so much games playing in these things, and I hate the games playing. But I love the way that in reality TV there are moments where you can see people becoming real. And people often become real when they are challenged and when they're forced to fall back on others and on their friends and make friends with and form unusual alliances. I think that's what makes television interesting. And so The Circle was particularly odd because in a way we didn't have that option. The alliances we were making was with people we didn't know. But as I said, in a way you have this sort of intense emotional bond with people that you cannot see and do not know. And I for example, that bond still exists. I was so excited to get a message from Woody late last night, and from Si this morning. I'm practically skipping around the house when I get these messages. Jan, and James. James is an absolute treasure, and yet in the program he's cast as my enemy.
Yeah.
And nothing could be further from the truth. And even in the program, nothing could be further from the truth. He may have thought he was my enemy. He may have been sort of stirred up to being sort of quite aggressive about me in some of the episodes. I haven't seen them, but whenever we spoke, there was this sort of undercurrent of extraordinary deep friendship and shared experiences, and that came across like that. And so when I met him, you only saw one hug. We had 3 hugs at least around that table, and it was just so affectionate. And that affection remains. I count James as a really good friend, and Woody. The fact that there's such a difference in age doesn't make any difference really. We have this incredible bond, which I'm very proud of. And Brooke, Brooke is wonderful, and I've done 2 podcasts with Brooke, and she's so professional, and so on the ball, and she just makes things so comfortable. And then I've also made friends with people from the other circle, and again we realise we have this sort of bond because of what we've been through. Freddie, Alex, Shuby, Seben, and so on.
Brooke seems to be someone who's just this complete ball of energy. Sometimes I'll come across her like Instagram stories and stuff, and I have to have a sit down afterwards because they're just so energetic. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah.
Well, but I think that's good. And what was extraordinary in the show is I didn't see that. Somehow, the production is very odd because not only are you edited after the show has finished, or after that week has gone, you're edited, and what you see on television is different in a way to what you experience. But equally, because the information you are getting in the room is controlled, what you are seeing of the other contestants is edited as well. So you are seeing only really what the show thinks would be useful for this particular story or particular plot. So you are controlled in many ways and manipulated. I found my time in the circle was probably one of the happiest months I've spent actually in my life. So I would have no complaints at all about my time in the circle. I think it was wonderful. I don't mind being a little bit manipulated. It's a game.
Yeah.
I knew it was a game. And once I threw myself into it, it was easy. I've done all the talking, haven't I? I'm being very boring. I'm so sorry. I've sort of monopolized you.
No. I like that. That tends to be the way. And for me, one of the reasons I mainly do this is to just learn a lot from people, and I think it's really important to just stop and listen. And a lot of people, there's so many podcasts where it is a two-sided conversation, and that's obviously great. But sometimes, for me, I just want to absorb so much rather than just interject all the time.
Well, you're a very good listener, I must say. You press the button and then you just let me go, and obviously I'm very excited about that. Maybe that's my Irish Welsh heritage.
So I just want to ask, is there anything in your life that you regret doing?
Oh, I thought that one was coming. oh, how could you possibly say that one? Yeah, almost every single day. I'm always mindful that you chatter away, and there's every possibility that you're going to offend somebody. If you want to be slightly humorous, there's every possibility you're going to offend somebody. I don't know. Maybe if you do the sort of thing professionally, you don't have regret. I have constant regret. I don't think there's a day that goes by when I don't find myself sort of bashing my head against the pillow, thinking, "Oh my God, I wish I hadn't said that." L'esprit d'escalier. It's not only about about those things that I wish I'd said to take advantage, to scintillate in conversation. Yes, there are those. The Oscar Wilde moments that I didn't have. But there's also, I wish I hadn't said that. I wish I hadn't done that. And it's too late to take that back.
Yeah.
And you have to live with that. So yes, it's mostly about things I wish I hadn't said, rather than things I wish I hadn't done. There's a number of things I wish I hadn't done. I wish I had done law or English at university. I wish I'd gone into the theatre earlier. I wish maybe I wish I'd just gone off and worked for the BBC, because I'm happy doing humdrum work. I used to do illustrations for the Radio Times at one point, and then went off to Greece, and that dried up immediately. And I'd never been able to get that one back, but I really enjoyed doing them. But I just love working. I love working, and I think I have a very good work ethic. I like to pass that on to other people if I can. I was talking to somebody the other day, and he said to me, well, he had this great revelation some years ago, and he looked at the way I had lived my life and realized that was wrong, and he must do everything differently. And I thought that was a salutary lesson. And I suspected this was his attitude. I think you're not human unless your life is full of regret. But at the same time, you tighten your belt, you find something positive, you draw on your springs of optimism, and you get on. You KBO, because there's another cliff to fall over. There's another hurdle to crash through, and there's another opportunity to regret it tonight. Say it and regret it later, because regret is not something new. It's not a new experience. It's a permanent condition, and you just find a way of getting through that. But there are some things you regret more than others. I regret, for example, that I didn't manage to have a proper relationship with my father, with either of them. I regret really that. I regret a lack of family life when I was a child. I regret that, maybe, but I couldn't have controlled that. So you can't really regret, honestly, things are out of your control. You cannot regret that. Is there anything you regret?
so many things. Similar to what you're saying, I'm up all night thinking about certain things, just trying to be funny and realizing that what I've done has actually hurt people's feelings. The amount of times I did that when growing up, that gets to me. I've mentioned it before on a past podcast, stuff like with teachers and stuff. I would love to make teachers laugh, but then I would always take it too far, and then the teachers.
But unless you do that, you don't learn anyway, do you?
Yeah, you realize where people's values are and what their limits are and things like that.
I think the most important lesson that we can ever teach the young, and that we have to keep learning every day, is to be kind. I think there is nothing more important than being kind.
Yeah.
And being prepared to look foolish, actually, which is the next stage from that. I think accepting that you can be ridiculous. It doesn't destroy yourself.
Yeah.
But you try never to make anyone else look ridiculous.
There you have it, Tim Wilson. I hope you guys enjoyed that conversation. It was something a little different than what I normally do, just because of the way it was sort of done. The idea of the podcast is that I sort of talk to creative people about their lives and careers and things, and Tim is definitely a very creative person, and like I said at the beginning, I hope to be able to chat to him again at some point and maybe go more in depth about his creative career a bit more and certain aspects. I feel like we covered things that I didn't want to try and delve too much deep into at the time because there's so much to talk about with Tim. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed that. In terms of future podcasts, I do have people lined up that I do want to chat to, but originally I wanted to hold off until the lockdown was over because I'd much prefer to chat to people in person. That's just my personal preference. Hence why I want to see Tim again. But I don't know how long that's going to take, and I would very much like to talk to these people, so I'd like to know if you guys have any feedback. Should I just wait and do it in person, or should I talk to these people online like I did here? Let me know what you think. And I might just ignore what you guys say and do what I want. I'm currently working on other creative projects at the moment as well as this, which I might discuss more further down the line. We'll see. But for now, thank you for listening to episode 11 of the Tom Finn podcast. Thank you for Tim for being a part of it. I'll put as much of his social media down in the description, as well as my social media things linked to this. Thank you to Toby Morgan for the graphics. Thank you to Danny Young and Luke Perrett for the music. Thank you guys for listening, and until next time, bye-bye.